Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners. This is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. Our host joining me today is BizSmart founder Kevin Brent. But before we start the webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions that you may have for Kevin, and he will do his best to answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you, Kevin. Over to you.
Thank you, Caroline. Right, really important topic this morning, how to build a simple lead generation plan. Those of you that have been through any kind of planning process with us will have used something like this, the Smart Web, and you've done your own planning process. Hopefully, you might have pulled out some critical paths from your growth plan as the things that you need to get right. And I can pretty much guarantee you that lead generation will be one of your critical paths. Generating a regular source of new appropriate leads coming through is absolutely critical for any business. And if you're serious about scaling your business, or even if you're just serious about getting a business that is stable and irons out some of the peaks and troughs, then you need to have, and you need to be able to execute a good lead generation process or processes. And when we think about the number of businesses that start up and the number of businesses that make it, we know that something like 40% of businesses will fail within the first 5 years, and even of those that survive, something like 96% of those businesses will remain as micro businesses without real stability in that business. Then certainly a reliable way of generating leads is one of the key requirements of generating that sustainable business. So it's worth your time and your effort. There's no magic answer. So you're not suddenly going to be able to find the magic pill and make it all happen. It does require some thought, a bit of time, and then some effort to actually execute it. But if you do things in a logical way, then you're going to stand much more chance of getting where you want to get to. So a full lead generation plan, or pretty much a marketing plan, is going to consist of these 5 things here: the value proposition, the lead generation framework, lead generation process, what we call a behaviors cookbook, and no plan really is complete without some kind of budget. I'm not going to cover all of these this morning. That's just to put it in context a little bit. We've looked at the value proposition in a previous webinar. I'm going to focus really this one on the lead generation framework. I'm also going to touch on the lead generation process, and I might just quickly explain what I mean by behaviors cookbook, and I think everybody understands probably what budgets mean, but we'll look at those as we go. So this is a really simple framework, but don't be completely fooled by its simplicity, because it is also a really powerful way of looking at things, and you can structure pretty much all of your lead generation activities, and that's what we're recommending that you do here with this framework. So it's got 2 axes. So if we look on the top, that's where the ring is, a red ring around existing and new customers. That's the audience. So that's who we looking at. So we can, if we're looking for more leads, we can clearly go back to our existing customers, or we can try and find brand new customers. So that's all that axis is about. And often we forget the existing customers, and we know, if we think about it, that they are a great source of potential further business, more leads. It's certainly easier to convert an existing customer that you've done some good work with than it is to go out and hunt and find and get on board a brand new customer. But we often don't give it the attention that it deserves. On the other axis are the type of activities, and I've divided these into what I've called farming and hunting activities. Now, you may well have heard of direct and indirect activities, or different terms for these, but the basic idea here is the kind of activities that you can do can either be you go out with your rifle, you get them in your sights, you hunt them down and you pick them off, one by one pretty much, or they can be much more about sowing seeds, hence your farming sort of type analogy. They're things that will take longer to nurture potentially, and you may not be able to see an immediate impact from it, but they're things that you know you need to be doing to be generating your awareness, maybe your credibility amongst your kind of people that you're looking to raise your awareness amongst. So that gives us these 4 boxes, and I'm going to take them one by one. But if you do this and you start to think of activities that you can do within each of these boxes, then you will have covered the spectrum of things that you might want to do. You will have heard about, I'm sure a lot of you will have heard about the marketing mix, and you need to have a mix of activities. Well, that's true, and this will help you to think about that mix in an appropriate way. What you'll see a little bit later on, though, is that it's not just about doing lots of things and having a mix. We really want to focus those down into the few things that we're going to do well and that will make the biggest difference. But the first thing to do, and I recommend you do this exercise, all you need is a big bit of paper or a flip chart. Well, certainly when we do it, we will put a flip chart on the wall and draw it up to these 4 boxes and just brainstorm each one in turn and start with, what could we do? Just list down all the sort of things that we think would make a difference in there. Don't limit yourself too much. Obviously got to have some kind of sense to them, but brainstorm a number of ideas, and it is better to do it with a couple of people rather than just on your own, hence sticking up on the wall and having a couple of people in the room and you're finding that you bounce ideas off. I'm going to go through these one by one, simply from the idea of giving some examples as to how to use this, but you will come up with much more appropriate ideas for your own businesses when you do this yourself. But if we look at existing customers, then, and the hunting activity, so the box 1 here, so this is where you've got existing customers and you're going to contact them one by one, rather than generally sending a newsletter out or something like that. We're going to contact them one by one. So what could you do? So this often is about, you're trying to either retain your customers because you've got them on some kind of recurring service and you want to make sure you retain them. So what sort of activities in here are going to help retain those customers? What are going to help them to tell you when you might be able to do something else with them? So how are you going to sell them more of what you do, more value, give them more value? But also you might want to think about things within this box about how you can get them to potentially refer other customers to you that they might know, because they hopefully think that you're great, and you might want them to be saying, well, actually, no, I've got another business owner that I know that could really do with your service. So what sort of things could you do in here that might help to encourage those 3 things? And it might be that if you're doing projects, do big projects, making absolutely sure that you build in an end of project review, and what you do in that end of project review to make sure that you've uncovered the things we've talked about. It might be an end of project review, it might be an annual review. If you've got clients on a recurring service again, you might want to build in at least an annual review, sit down with them, ideally probably a little bit more frequently, but as a minimum an annual review. Many of us go months and years without necessarily picking up the phone or talking to a previous customer. You might want to build in feedback surveys. They can be a great way of just keeping in touch, but specifically with an individual customer. So there's just 3 sort of things, ideas that you might want to do that we could call hunting activities to your existing customers. But as I say, if you go through this exercise, you'll probably come up with some great ideas that are much more relevant to your specific business. So if we then move down to the next one, box 2, here we're still talking about things we could do with our existing customers, but now we're talking about more of those farming activities, so sowing the seeds. And this is just generally keeping in touch, making in a good way, not bombarding them with rubbish, but providing some value to them, but in a gentle, ongoing contact, non-invasive sort of way. So newsletters, a lot of us will do newsletters, might be monthly blogs, you might run a LinkedIn user group or something like that. And again, you'll have lots of other ideas, but these are things that you could be doing with your existing customers. So what could you do with your existing customer group that would just keep that relationship going, keep it warm, keep it ticking, so that when they do, so that you're in their mind in a good way, as I said before, so that when they do have a need that matches what you can deliver, that you're in their mind and they think of you. So that's the sort of thing within that farming box for existing customers. If we then move across to still farming activities, but we're now talking about brand new customers. So this is, where we know what our target audience is. So this is not completely untargeted, because we're going to be focusing on whatever our ideal sort of type clients are, but these are people that we don't know yet. So clearly things within this box might go your search engine optimization, your SEO type work, anything you might do with social media, tweets, groups, whatever, networking activities. You might go to BNI or to Vibrant Network or to any of the, or to 4N or to any of the other networks that are out there. That might be one of the things that you do or think of doing within this. Maybe you come up with the idea of an ebook that people could have. There might be competitions, but again, there'd be loads of things that you could think of within here. So put them within here, brainstorm them out, and just make this list. So this is keeping in, hopefully, just generally sending things out to the right sort of group that again raises your profile in a good way. So hopefully raising your credibility, not just awareness of you, but that's out there. And then, of course, finally, the final box is what could we do from a hunting targeted activity point of view for potential new customers. And it might be an email or just a mail shot campaign. You've got a list of your ideal types of businesses you want to contact, and you're working your way through with a process which might be a targeted email campaign. You might have a way that if you are using an ebook, for example, and they're downloading it from your website, maybe you've got a specific targeted approach. Then they go on your target list, and you follow up in a particular way, and you do that. Maybe again LinkedIn. Some people use LinkedIn very effectively to search for the kind of people they're after, and then to develop a conversation on LinkedIn, and maybe a similar sort of thing with Facebook. So, but again, these are just examples. There'll be a lot more things that you might think of doing that would be specific to your business. So we've done that. We've now got ourselves some ideas across all of these 4 boxes. But we're not going to be able to do everything. So you will have, if you've done this well, you'll have quite a long list within each of these boxes, and there might be great things to do, but you just cannot do everything. So the next thing you need to do is ask yourself the question, for each box, what one thing, if we did it really well and consistently well, so we didn't just do it once, but we consistently did it well every day, every week, every month, whatever it might be, if we did it consistently well and to the best of our abilities, would give us the most, we think would give us the most return, and take that one out. So, and that, it's a really simple question, and it might be that you think a targeted email campaign would be the one for the top right hand box, and that's the one we're going to focus on, and let's work that up. We'll talk about that in a little bit more, but the idea here is that we really then start by asking that question. We just pick out the one thing that is going to make the biggest difference. Now, if you think you can do one of the other things as well, great, then fine. You might effectively add back one or two of the others. But let's start there. Now, you might not know that this is going to work. This might be, at the moment, you just think, well, I think that would work if we were to do that. It's our best shot. So this isn't going to be set in stone, because you're then going to do that as well as you can, get it going, and of course you're going to assess it as it goes. But the other thing to look at across here, when you've done this, is there something that might be coordinated across these 4 boxes? So don't just look at them in isolation as I've started you down the path here, but think about also if there's some way you can coordinate it. And I've just circled here the ebook, because an ebook isn't going to be appropriate for everybody, but let's just say it is for your business. It might tick a lot of the boxes here. And if you said, well, let's write an ebook first of all, let's get that sorted. We could do a really good one on how to do lead generation activities or something, for sake of argument. So let's do a really good ebook on that. But let's have it on our website so that somebody can download it, because then they've got that's the bottom right hand box, potentially new customers, farming activities, they can download it, but then we can directly follow it up. We have our process. Great, see, you've downloaded our ebook, can we help you about how to do your lead generation activities? And you can follow up like that. But equally, you'll see that I've linked it in the other boxes too, because we can certainly make that available generally to our existing customers, but we could also pick on specific customers that we think might have that need and approach them, whether it be in one of our annual reviews or something like that, and talk to them about the ebook or other things that we might have. So this is, it's just a hypothetical example really, but just starting to make you think about coordinating it. So it might be, you might do a competition on your website. You might think that would be a great idea. Could we coordinate that across the different groups and look at it in slightly different ways to make it work really well and tick all those boxes? But again, remember, this is about not just a one-off activity. You've got to be thinking about what can we do consistently well that will make that difference. So that will get you a long way to thinking about the kind of activities you can do in a structured way, and then focusing down to a handful of things. It could just be 4 key things, or it might be 4 to 10 things across these boxes that you would do. Now, if we think about it, if we look at the top right-hand box, and we're talking about a targeted activity to brand new customers, those things are going to take quite a lot of time. They are going to take effort and time to do. The things in the bottom right-hand box, once you've done them once, they'll tick along. So you might well have more things that you think you can do in the bottom right-hand box, in the farming, and possibly the bottom left box, in the more farming sort of type activities, than you probably would in the top 2. And I would counsel that really, ideally, what you would want is 1 or 2 things in the top boxes that you end up doing, so that you can focus on them. So that was the lead generation framework, and what I'm going to do, just going to pick a little bit on the lead generation process now, because for example, I just said let's do a direct mail campaign. Well, that's great, but it doesn't tell us what we're going to do in a direct mail campaign. Is there a process to how we're going to do that? And to make a lead generation process work properly, you've got to be able to spell it out exactly as to what you're going to do. You've also got to then be able to work out what it is you're trying to achieve with that and the kind of metrics that you want to measure, so that you can look at it. Remember, I mentioned that sometimes we might not know that this is going to work. We've got to test it and see. We don't want to be doing something forever that just isn't giving us any return. So we've got to be able to measure it. So spelling these things out a little bit more is the next step. And I'm going to take one example here and just very quickly talk about this, but ideally what you do is you would pick the one thing in each box and just spell it out a little bit more as to what's involved in doing that, and that becomes your lead generation and verging on a sales process then as well for this. So if we take a targeted mail campaign, for example, and we're going to take that, then what we want to be able to do is say, okay, well, what's going to be involved in that? So I've just spelt out, you can do this in any way you like, but I've just spelt out across the top that the first thing we want to be able to do each week or month is we want to be able to identify and agree the next prospect. So that's probably off the mail shot list that we've got. We've got a list of prospects. So we've got to be able to identify and agree which one's going to do. We've got to be able to mail. We're going to then mail something to them, and you've got some boxes here to say sort of what kind of stuff you might mail them. But then we're going to have a telephone follow-up once we've mailed them, and then if they're interested, we're going to try and get them to a sales meeting. We're going to try and go and see them, have a coffee with them, whatever it is. And if they're not interested, then we're going to put them onto, if they're not interested, then we're going to put them onto a more farming sort of type activity, so we don't lose track of them. So that is a very simple 4 or 5 step process in doing a targeted mail campaign. And then you can see the boxes below. I just suggested you might want to just reaffirm why it is you're doing that. How are you going to do that? So how are we going to identify the next prospects? Are we going to, is that going to be off the mail shop list that we've got, or is it going to be off the downloads that we've got? We're going to collect them once a week, because the next one is when. So when are we going to do that? We're going to put that in our diary then, so that every first Monday of the month, that's when we're going to do that. For example, who is it that's going to do it? Is it me as a business owner, or is it somebody else that I'm going to ask to do that? and then how many are we going to send out, or how many of it are we going to do, and what are the success key performance indicators that we can do. If you did that for the targeted mail campaign, you've then got a nice little process to follow. Now, you want to think about if you are going to do something like this, and we've got the sales meeting is, say, the key step in here. That's what we're leading to. We want to get an appointment to actually go and see this. We want to have sparked interest, got the appointment. If that's our key step, you've got to think back from there a little bit, really, because how many of those can you how many do you need to do? If you think that you're going to convert 50% of those into a sale, how many do you need to do to get the kind of numbers of new customers on board that you want? So that perhaps is your starting point, but you've got to ask yourself, is that reasonable? And if that comes out as being 4 a month, is that a sensible target? Can I do 1 a week of those meetings? If that's right, great. If it comes out as being 10 a month, you've got to start thinking, well, actually, have I got the time in my diary to do that? And if that's what it requires, maybe it's not going to work. Maybe I've got to think slightly differently here. But let's just say it comes out as 1 a month. Then you might say, okay, well then, how many telephone follow-ups can I do, or do I need to do based on what I think is a percentage conversion rate for that, and in mail shots? Because if you should only really, if you're going to do a mail shot, for example, you should only do the number that you feel you can follow up. So there's no good sending out 1,000 emails on a Monday if you can only make 10 phone calls in the next few days. So you've got to bear that in mind. Now, I'm not going to go through that in detail, but I've just filled one in, for example, here as to what we want to do. So you would end up with something like this, and you've now got a process that not only can you follow, and you can stick the dates in your diary, you can make yourself up a little tracking spreadsheet, or however you like to track as well, to see whether you did actually do your 20 mails a month, if 5 a week. Did I do my 20 follow-up calls? What was the success rate in terms of getting to my sales meeting, and did I end up with the meetings that I want? You can track that, and this is the reason why we focus down on one of the reasons we focus down on handful activities, because you can then track this properly. It's no good in this day and age not knowing how effective your marketing is. You certainly don't want to get to the end of the year and be spending a lot of money on all sorts of different things and not quite know whether it was working or not. So this will be a really good way of keeping track. And whilst it might, some of you might be thinking, well, I get the box idea, the 4 boxes, that's quite good, that's big picture sort of type thinking, it's quite fun, doing a bit of brainstorming, and that gives you a bit of focus on it. Some of you might also be thinking, well, I'm not so sure about this bit, because this looks like this is a bit processy, this, I've got to sit down, I've got to be a bit detailed on this. Well, if you're serious about growing your business, you need to do this. It's worth the time to do this, and you won't have to do it that often if you think about it, because if you've done it once and you then do this process, you keep yourself to task and you do it and it works, you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel all the time. You've got that process that works, and you might want to do it for, as I say, certainly the 2 boxes at the top for targeted activities, but you probably want to do it for 1 or 2 of the other boxes too, but you might only have 4 or 5 of these done, but you've got a process you can follow, but you can also give it to somebody else, so that if you get to the point where you can see how that's working and you've got it defined, you might well then be able to, when you either outsource it potentially to somebody else and you've got a framework for them to follow, but you also have a framework to measure them against, because if you were able to do those 20 calls a month and get a 10% conversion rate and to the sales meeting, but the person you've outsourced it to only gets 2%, then what's gone on there? And you can certainly talk to them about that and work that through, but you've got something solid to brief them on and to monitor them. But obviously you might also employ somebody or have somebody within your team that at some point you say, well, actually that now becomes your role to do that. And again, you've got a way of keeping track of them, but they've got a really good guide to follow and they know what they're doing. So that's a very quick whiz through, really, the lead generation framework and a little bit of the lead generation process. I'm not going to go through the behaviours cookbook and the budget, but just the behaviours cookbook really comes from that lead generation process, because as you were spotted there, we've said make X number of phone calls, send X number of letters. That kind of becomes your cookbook. That's like the recipe that you're going to follow And if you had that for 3 or 4 processes, you're making those up into a kind of a cookbook, so that is followed. That's really all that is. There are certain ways you can lay it out and whatever else, but that's at its simplest. That's what it is. So you've got those behaviours that you want to be able to follow every month, because you know that it's going to lead towards the leads, basically. All right, and yeah, clearly, ideally, if you would then start to budget that out and actually put a cost against it, remembering to include the time involved as a cost as well. But I'm not going to go into budgeting. That would be another topic. So that's it. That's all I wanted to cover really today. Thank you, Caroline.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Kevin. You've got a couple of questions waiting for you. The first one is from Susan, and she asks, you mentioned the value proposition. Can you remind me what that is, please?
Yeah, great. Okay, value proposition. So I think what we'll probably do is should we send out the link after this?
Yeah.
Because we covered that in a previous webinar. The value proposition is a way of succinctly putting together your key messaging from your marketing point of view, really. So it's just a little one pager, and you want to cover within it who's your target audience. So it's for your service or product, whatever it is that you're selling. So who's it for? Describe your target audience. What's the need? What's the pain that they've got? What is your service, and what does it do? What are the benefits of your service against the needs and the pains that you've identified earlier on? Why are you different from somebody else? So unlike whoever your competitors are, what makes you different, and how can you prove it? What's the credibility that you can do? If you've got those things succinctly written down, then again that leads to your messaging as to how you might communicate then when you're doing your lead generation. So when you're doing your letters or your phone calls, you've got the messaging very clear. Or equally, if you're briefing out to an agency, they've got a really good understanding of what your product or service is about. So thank you for that.
Okay, great. Next one is from Mike, and he asks, I've been told we need a marketing mix of lots of activities because you never know which will work and which won't. Shouldn't we have lots of things in each box?
Okay, thanks, Mike. I think I've probably covered that as we went through a little bit, but yes, you will start off. You should start off with a lot of things in your boxes. So you want to have a lot of things, but as I said, you need to be able to focus it down, because you just can't do everything. And the idea of not knowing what will work, you've got to find a way to find what works. So if you just do everything all the time, or lots of little things half-heartedly, and you never measure them properly either, you're never going to move on. You're always going to be in that situation, and you might be lucky, and you might find something in that works and takes off, and great, fantastic. But equally, you might find that you're just wasting a lot of time, spending a lot of money, and not getting many leads. So you're much better off starting with the mix in terms of generating your ideas, but then really asking that question, what one thing in there do we really think is going to make the biggest difference if we did it really well and we did it consistently well, and focus on that. But that will still give you a mix, because you're covering those 4 areas of existing and new customers and targeted and or farming and hunting activities. So it gives you a mix, but not in a haphazard way. Hope that answers your question, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Your next question from Jonathan, how do we track whether our activities are working?
Okay, another great question, and that comes back to the lead generation process going into the behaviours cookbook. So you should know what it is that you're expecting, so you can track whether you've made the phone calls or not. You can track whether that's led to the meetings or not, and you can track whether that's led to the sales or not. That's great. That's with a targeted process. With some of your farming activities, it's less easy to do that, because they're more general. They might, whether it's downloads or whatever it is. So again, you need to pick the sort of measures that you think that activity should be generating, and then tracking those. But yeah, so I think that's really what you want to be doing there. Okay.
Okay. I think that's it for the moment. Thank you again, Kevin, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of the presentation and Kevin's contact details out to you all shortly. So please do email him any questions that you may have. But before we close, just a quick reminder, this webinar is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client, please access our archive of webinars by visiting our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and you can join us again soon. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.